That's brand new Starbreaker featuring Tony Harnell on lead vocal. And the name of that tune right there is called End of Alone. And, of course, you know Tony Harnell. He's a former lead singer of TNT. And he has a new project, or actually this would be the sophomore release, I believe. Or actually this might be your third release, right, Tony?
It's the second, yeah.
Second release,
you're right, sophomore.
Right. Of Starbreaker, and we want to welcome Tony Harnell back to the Classic Metal Show. This will be your third time on the show, Tony.
Wow, I'm like a resident now.
Yeah, the first time I got a chance to talk to you is when TNT more or less kind of came back with My Religion.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, was a phenomenal CD. I loved it. In fact, we played the song My Religion on the show by request just a week ago.
Oh, great.
So people still remember that, and I was impressed that after, so many years, TNT made a comeback with such a strong effort, and not only that, but being able to see it in some of the major distribution centers, such as like Best Buy and Walmart and so forth. And you guys had a pretty good run with that.
Yeah, it did well for us. We did very well in Europe with it. It opened up some new doors, and we got a couple new countries where we got popular again, which is always nice late in your career. Sold very well in what we call our home country of Norway.
Sure.
My former home country. No, I still have quite a lot of affinity for that country, obviously. No, it was great. It was a great run, and I'm very proud of that album.
Right. So then you came back with a follow-up to that CD, and it, and this isn't a criticism of you, but it wasn't quite as strong or as rockin' as My Religion. It kind of got soft on us,
Yeah. I don't know what to tell you. I fully intended on doing actually a heavier album than My Religion. That was my intention, but you're in a band and you're working with other people, and it just didn't. We rolled the dice and they didn't line up. So
sure.
That's kind of the way it happened. I mean, you try to when you're on a roll. I think you sometimes try to get a record out every year, and with the distance involved, I think it makes it a little bit more difficult to keep the creative juices flowing especially between two people.
Right.
If one person's on a roll, it's easy for them to maybe knock out 2 or 3 really great records, which a lot of solo artists do. But I think when you're in a band and you're dependent upon other people, and you're compromising and you're, dependent on somebody else for that ultimate result, then sometimes it's a hit or miss.
Right. Well, obviously you're no longer in the band TNT, and we haven't had you on the show since you left the band a couple years ago. Can you give us kind of a brief rundown there as to what made you decide to leave the band and, go on your own more or less and, do your Starbreaker music? What led up to that? Anything you can tell us about?
I mean, I don't really want to air any dirty laundry, but it was, let's just say that it had run its course finally for me. I think it just had, it was a great run, a lot of stuff that I'm very proud of, and obviously a lot of exciting times, both in the early days and even some of the recent days. So I thought it was. I just had felt that between the traveling and the just the distance and the payoff, they weren't equal.
Sure.
The amount of work involved, the amount of stress on the body, physically, mentally, with all that traveling, and you have to travel when you're in a rock band, but the way that we were doing it, where there were times when I was going back and forth to Europe as much as 10 times a year, and so I felt like I kind of had jet lag for 4 years.
Right.
I pretty much didn't have much of a break from that. So I think I was just kind of tired of that, and there were some personal things going on as well, and so it all sort of added up. You make those lists, the pros and the cons were far greater. So I just made the decision that if it was going to happen, it needed to happen now, and I wanted to make my move and go do other things musically, and you know, it may sound a bit strange, but if it was a big band of more stature, then obviously the way that things were organized and the time and travel involved would have been more palatable.
Sure, sure.
With more money and more payoff involved, you know.
Right.
Because it is my job after all.
Right, sure. Now, I know when I had spoken to you for the release of All the Way to the Sun, you were already, you had mentioned that during the interview about all the traveling and, you know, being a little weary of the travel and, you know, how you know, it was taking a toll on you at that point. And then, you know, what was it, about a year later that you announced your departure from that. So, who could say? I couldn't blame you for that. That's a lot of traveling back and forth from the States to Europe and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and, you know, you have to imagine if you were in a normal situation, let's say with a band that puts a record out every year and then goes on tour, which, you know, I mean, touring and releasing records has obviously changed dramatically over the past 5 years, you know, 5-10 years. But if you were doing somewhat of a normal routine, you'd release an album and you would maybe hit the States, and then maybe you'd go over to Europe for a month or so, and then maybe you'd go to Asia, and then you'd come home. So you'd sort of constantly be moving, but you do it kind of more or less in one long go, and you might even have breaks in between where you came home for a few weeks or a month and then went back out again and so forth. But when you're bouncing back and forth like that, it's not the length of the flight that's so exhausting. It's the jet lag.
Sure.
And being expected to do a top-notch performance 1 or 2 nights after arriving. I just was starting to feel like I wasn't giving my best, and being the perfectionist that I am, that wasn't good enough for me. So,
well, you're not in your 20s either.
I'm not. Wow, somebody told me yesterday that I looked like I was, and I was really very happy with that compliment. No, that's true. I mean, I keep myself in pretty good shape, but yeah, you know, even at 20, back and forth like that is takes its toll. The only difference is when you're 20, you probably don't eat as well as I do now.
Yeah, sure. Well, Tony, I was telling you off the air here that this new Starbreaker release that is currently available is probably, you know, you're sounding very fresh and very youthful on this. Speaking of age and youth.
Well, thank you.
And this is, you know, I've always enjoyed your vocal style in TNT. And what was your other project? I know you had another project.
Westworld.
There you go. I know I have both of those CDs too.
That's right. And then I had another one, a one-off called Morning Wood, which was actually a fan favorite.
Sure. So when you do these different projects, I realized that TNT was a collaboration. And you know, you had your Westworld, and you have this Starbreaker. How do you distinguish between all these projects in the way that you approach the music, or do you approach it all the same way in each situation?
It's a very interesting thing. I mean, they're all obviously different. The guys I work with in each project are different, so what they bring to the table is different. So I try to adjust to the person I'm working with, and they're all of them have been extremely talented in their own way, and they're all very different from each other. With Magnus, he's very fast, and he's very professional, and he's very easy to work with. He's really laid back, and it's kind of a situation where I felt like on this last record we did that I was kind of that I could kind of take what he does naturally and just sort of, I guess you could say, direct it a little bit into a certain, you know, area, point him down the path, you know, and say, let's go down here and see what this looks like, you know. And so it was really cool, and it's still very much as much his album as it is mine. his influence is very strong on it. So there's always a compromise there when you're working with somebody in that situation. But when I do these albums for Frontiers Records, which is a melodic rock label, there's no bones about it. They are what they are, and they have a very specific audience. I